I've got another question, Dom and Tim, especially.
And Rick,
And,
listening
well, I
patiently.
think Dom and playing in the NHL and coaching in the NHL and the Calgary Flames come to question the playoffs now. And when I talk about Bennett and the role he's playing, and the other guy and the role he's playing, and they didn't play that role, at least Bennett didn't on the Flames team. And all of a sudden they go there and play like they're playing. And I'm just wondering about this art of coaching and how you create the star concept, the role concept. Well, your role is, and how can you have two first lines in the NHL? You know what I'm saying? You're watching it happen before your eyes, and you know them because you've been on the ice with them. What's your take on how well they're playing? Is the environment they're in the right time for them to step up?
Yeah, I think I think with Sam in particular, I think, and again, this is my my opinion on it, and it, whether it's right or not, who knows? But he never got the chance, like the legitimate chance to play at center in with certain players. They gave him opportunities, but and I'll be honest with you, like I watch him, like he's terrible on faceoffs. Like you look at his percentages and they're awful on faceoffs. But I think, whoever has kind of given him the role to be like, they've kind of overlooked that side of it. And they've given him, because like I know as a centerman, there's just certain things, instincts that you have that just, being in the middle of the ice, being able to maintain your speed at times. I mean, like it's like there's times that I felt sorry for O'Reilly in the defenseman in Toronto, because he's like a shark out there, like just kind of coming around and then being able to, like, so effective that you never really knew when he was coming at you. And so I never really felt like he had that leash in Calgary. Like, and I think actually it came up article I read, and they talked about, they had Monty and they had Backlund ahead of him, and he was kind of, he had to play wing if he was going to play with those guys. And if you look at it objectively, it's like, oh, he's not very good on the draws, so maybe he's better suited for in the wing. But and again, like I'll watch, games with him play, and yeah, he's, there's parts of his game that, like Monty and Johnny were, they high level of execution. I don't think Sam has a high level of execution, but I think his overall game at center is more suited to what wins you games in the playoffs. And I think that's ultimately what, when you saw it in small sample size, you're like, oh, he's not executing, he's bad on the draws, he's kind of loose, and he's kind of, but I think it's, yeah, you just really didn't, and again, Michael Backlund, really, really good on the draws, really sound defensively, could execute. And I think that's part of the reason they didn't give him opportunity. But again, like it's easy to sit back as an armchair quarterback here and just kind of say, oh, you should have done this. But from my side, I think those were some of the things that factored into it. But I mean, he's so effective. And again, he's still doing the same things that, as if you look at him objectively as a centerman and say, God, he's terrible. I think a couple of games I looked, he was like 25% on the draws. Like that's horrible. Like you want to be at least 50. And I think that's probably factored in a little bit in that. But I mean, I think the biggest thing, as I said, is that when you're a center and he was drafted as a center and you played as a center and he had that kind of, to be able to build up momentum through the middle of the ice and to be able to kind of see things in that way and to be able to have that X factor that, like, when he comes and he finishes checks on you, like he's on top of you right away. I think they took that away, that took that away from him playing wing a little bit. and you didn't. And again, you're coming through the middle of the ice with all kinds of pace and speed with a middle lane drive and all that. I think that restricted him, and now he's obviously been able to play, and now he's got somebody with Chuck who's so smart to be able to like extend possession a lot of the time because he's so good at protecting it. Because he's a train wreck to watch skate. Like, you watch him skate, you're like, how does this guy play in the NHL and be so effective? He's lumbering down the ice and everything else, but I think they just really, really complement each other. And they just gave those guys fits, right? And so, but that's just my sense. They just didn't give him a long enough runway, and were willing to overlook some of the things that that the warts in his game a little bit, right?
I think those are all good points, Dom. I like from my seat, a couple of things that are interesting. I remember sitting with Rob Ramage, watching, I think, the major junior all-star game, and talking about who the best players were that year. He said, I like Sam Bennett. He thought he was the best player in the draft that year. And I think, he had a tough start in Calgary. Like he didn't sort of produce, if I remember correctly, he had a tough time putting up the numbers, and we know that happens to players. But I think there was a loss of belief in him as an offensive player. And I totally agree with you. They did not give him the opportunity to play in the top six on a consistent basis. And who doesn't love to have a player like an offensive player like him who plays as hard as he does and can be as intimidating as he is, even though he does, of course, cross the line at times physically. But that's a pretty unique kind of player. He was over 100-point guy in his last year in junior, and it might surprise you. I just looked up his faceoff stats. 3 of his last 4 years with Calgary, he was over 50%, and his last year and then this past year, I think he was below 50. But I think there was just a lack of belief in him, unfortunately, and where that came from, who knows? But it's too bad. It's good for him. But I really did not like to see him go. I thought he was, in the same way as I thought Toronto made a big error in, they're trying to decide, do we give Nylander the big, huge bucks? Do we sign Hyman, or do we let him go? They let Hyman go. They signed Nylander to the big bucks. And who doesn't love having a Zach Hyman on your team? Like, geez. Yeah. And as great a player as Michael Nylander is, how many teams can do without him in the playoffs in some ways? And again, I'm talking and he had a good playoff this year. He was effective offensively, but not a puck retrieval guy, and all players can't be all things. But I think that was a big error for them, especially holding out and all that stuff. Is like, hey, you don't want to be here? Go play somewhere else. Get your money. We got a hard-working, gritty, offensive, a guy that can contribute offensively, defensively, penalty killing, shot blocking. We'll take him, and you go find your money somewhere else. I thought it was a big error, but
fellas, I've got our last mass of the school year, and my AD just gave me the side eye, so I've got it starting at 9:20. So I better make my way. Trust me, I'd love to continue this conversation here.
Hopefully it's geometry and you can get some angling work in.